of the gas fields that lie both, as we say, across both our border and Venezuelans' border, as well as across in Venezuelans' borders. Exclusively to them, they are the largest oil reserves in the world, and they have a significant amount of gas. Since 2016 to now, we have spent a lot of time and a lot of conversation with Trinidad and Tobago all about the potential of these gas reserves and what they can mean for Trinidad and Tobago and the great potential it has, and even, we can argue, the necessity for us to be able to have access to these gas fields. You would know that by 2018 we had negotiated, I had participated in those negotiations, and allow me to use the opportunity to just record here, with a bit of an interruption, my sorrow on the passing of Mr. Mark Loquan, who became quite a good friend of mine as we joined forces together in 2016-2017. So as I say that, I recall Mark was there with me as we negotiated and were successful in obtaining a term sheet, a commercial term sheet for the Dragon gas field by 2018. By 2019, the United States had put additional sanctions on Venezuela. There were already certain sanctions that existed, but the sanctions that came in place between 2019 to 2020 ground to a halt or progress with the Dragon field that we were pursuing and we had a commercial term sheet with. In 2020, we began our quest in Washington, D.C., and began knocking on the doors and having the conversations with the decision makers in Washington, D.C. It was in 2022, I recall it very clearly. I had gone up, I had met with attorneys at law on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago to come up with a strategy for us to pursue with our American counterparts, our allies, pursue the ability, despite sanctions, for us to get access to the Venezuelan gas that was only 18 kilometers of pipeline away from reaching to our infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago. You are very familiar with some of the stories coming out of that. So during 2020 and in 2023, we began to have success, and it was in January 2023, after a number of meetings, including meetings at the White House, at Blair House, at the Summit of Americas during the period of 2022, and meeting and forming relationships with decision makers, congressmen and senators on both the Republican as well as the Democratic side, and then other CARICOM leaders joining with Trinidad and Tobago to advocate for Trinidad and Tobago's applications to OFAC, that in January 2023, we announced to Trinidad and Tobago we had met with success and we had received an OFAC license to be able to pursue Dragon. Of course, at that time, the OFAC license payment for gas from Venezuela was limited and did not permit cash. We continued with our work, making progress in Venezuela. I always smile when I hear those who are opposed to what is good for Trinidad and Tobago, the opposition, saying, well, why is it that Young went to Venezuela so many times and 13 trips to Venezuela? Trinidad and Tobago saw why it was, because by December of 2023, we had obtained a 30-year exploration and production license from the government of Venezuela for the production and export of gas from Dragon to Trinidad and Tobago. In between there, we had persuaded the United States, again through our attorneys at law and my working with them. We had put in for applications for amendments to our OFAC license, which had come in October 2023, later on from January 2023, that permitted us to pay in hard currency, US currency, and fiat currency as well. And of course, that license is due to expire on the 31st of October 2025. We got an amended OFAC license on December 18th, 2023, because by then we had begun to do the necessary work and look at how we would be able to execute Dragon. And of course, the license from the government of Venezuela, the exploration and production license for 30 years to Trinidad and Tobago, was on the 21st of December 2023. You would all recall that in or around April 2024, again, those persons who unfortunately sometimes don't seem to want what is the best for Trinidad and Tobago started jumping on the cancellation by the US government in April 2024 of a general license number 44, to deal with Venezuela. And that was a general license that had allowed companies, oil and gas companies from around the world, to have conversations with the government of Venezuela to pursue oil in Venezuela, which the majority of them were doing, and also to look at gas. But by then we had explained Trinidad and Tobago had secured our own specific license from OFAC, the United States Treasury, to pursue the Dragon gas exploration and production. There was of course, that didn't affect us. Nothing affected us. There was a hardening, I would say, of sanctions after that April 2024, and a sort of change in the US policy. And we are seeing firsthand in Trinidad and Tobago, and now the rest of the world is seeing as well, how when the United States government changes different policies, how it affects our various territories and our various livelihoods, including cost of goods and these types of things. There was a change of government in the United States, and in January of this year, President Trump's administration came in, and of course, President Trump's administration, as they're entitled to do, began to explore different policies and implement different policies when it came to a host and variety of things, with a number of executive orders, including Venezuela. We would have all seen on the 24th of March of this year a presidential order issued from the White House specifically to do with oil and oil-based products from Venezuela, and to put a tariff on it. I had by then had the opportunity to be in direct conversation and contact with U.S. Special Envoy at the State Department for Latin America, one of the persons who works very closely with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Mr. Mauricio Claver Caron, who is the U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America. And we had some very good conversation, and at the time it gave me the opportunity to describe to him how Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector was made up, and in particular the benefits that we can offer both on the LNG side, as well as importantly for food security on the ammonia side, because we had become the largest exporter of ammonia, and we're between 1 and 2 with Russia. But now we were number 1 exporter of ammonia, which is necessary for food security around the world. It allowed an opportunity for the development of a relationship inside with the policy decision makers in Washington, D.C. on matters that could potentially affect us in the CARICOM region, as well as us particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. After that, there were a host of tariffs that were being issued that affected potentially, and we're now starting to see the effects, the CARICOM region, which concerned us in CARICOM. For example, potential tariffs on shipping fleets, and the additional charges of $1.5 million and $1 million at port calls of any shipping fleet that has either a Chinese vessel in its fleet or an order for a Chinese vessel. We had a CARICOM heads meeting, and that was raised frontally, and we were getting an assessment, and I can say that CARICOM appointed a particular envoy from CARICOM, 2 of them I believe, and they made the submissions on CARICOM's behalf to the US body that is in charge of now looking at the applicability of those tariffs. I then had a meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio on the 26th of March, just a few weeks ago, 2025, which gave us a perfect opening to now speak to, when you look at the executive order with respect to Venezuela, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is at the head of a committee that has been set up by President Trump to look at how they would be developing tariffs to do with Venezuela oil and oil products, etc. We had a very good conversation, as you heard me say from this lectern a few weeks ago, and he gave an assurance that they will not seek to harm Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular we discussed how the energy deals that we had negotiated stand to benefit not only Trinidad and Tobago, but also the wider CARICOM region, and as well how it fits in to the United States policy. Secretary of State Rubio made it very clear that he understood what I was saying and how it would affect. We even got into some discussion as to commercial terms, and as I have told Trinidad and Tobago, we gave the assurance that, listen, Prime Minister Young, nothing that we are going to do with respect to our US policy is meant to harm Trinidad and Tobago, and we will continue to stay engaged with you, because understand, as we unfold our policy and the United States policy, in particular with Venezuela and other countries across the world, we recognize that they will have some effects, but we will remain engaged and we will find the necessary outlets and the necessary ways to make sure that Trinidad and Tobago is not harmed. That was on the 26th of March 2025. On the 28th of March, literally a couple days later, we saw coming out of Washington, and in particular from the OFAC office at the US Treasury, the revocation of a number of licenses that had been granted to commercial entities to do with Venezuela. So, for example, you may have seen in international news a license that had been granted to the Italian oil and gas company ENI, as well as to the Spanish oil and gas company Repsol, two companies that I have been engaged with. And you would have seen a few days ago, I also met with one of the head executives of Repsol right here at Whitehall to continue the types of conversations we've been having. That OFAC had cancelled the United States policy, had led to a revocation of their licenses and other licenses that commercial operations had. In the meantime, we have these tariffs that have been applied. We now know Trinidad and Tobago, there appears to be a 10% tariff from the United States for any goods that we export into the United States. We've now been able to say that our LNG and petroleum products don't fall in that basket, but we're currently studying what other products may be affected. The Minister of Trade has had her meetings with the United States and has made the requisite requests for meetings with her counterparts in the United States government to have discussions. But as was told to me today by the United States Embassy in Trinidad and Tobago, every country in the world that has tariffs applied to them in the manner that they have been is trying to get engaged in those types of conversations. So there seems to be a lot of unsettling times in Washington, D.C. with respect to these tariffs. What I can tell Trinidad and Tobago, bear with me for 1 second, is that we have now been informed that our license from OFAC, which is dated the 18th of December 2023, has been revoked by OFAC. And that license is now revoked by OFAC, as well as our coquina mannequin license. It came a little while after the others. What I can tell Trinidad and Tobago is I don't have more details than that. I have been in touch with our attorneys at law in Washington, D.C. There is a process for, I wouldn't say appeal of this revocation, but there is a process for you to make an application for it not to be, or for there to be amendments. And we are going to be engaged in that process on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago. I have also reached out to Mauricio Claver Caron, who is the special envoy, and put in a request for a telephone conversation with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, all of which I expect us to have the opportunity for me once again on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago to present our case. This does not come necessarily as a surprise, seeing how volatile things are, not only with respect to the policy with Venezuela, but what we're seeing, for example, with the application of tariffs. I can't tell Trinidad and Tobago much more than I have right now, but what I can say, based on the personal conversations and discussions that I've managed to have with the two gentlemen that I've just said, as well as some others that we are pursuing, I expect that we will be given an audience. I expect that we will be given the opportunity to continue to make our case. I am to be honest, not surprised by the outcome, because they did say that they did explain to me the US policy and what they were trying to achieve with respect to Venezuela. But the words that they would not harm Trinidad and Tobago, I believe, I have no reason to doubt it whatsoever, remain in play. And we had also had discussion, which I was not at liberty, and nor am I at liberty to get into details now, as to what we may be able to do going forward. This is not, I took the time to go through a bit of the history to show Trinidad and Tobago. This is not the first time that we've had, if I may put it, a hurdle put in our way of access. It was only last week or the week before when I was speaking to Mr. Cedric Kremers from Shell, the executive globally at Shell who's in charge of gas integrated business, whose portfolio this falls under. We had already begun to discuss the Manatee field and what can happen in the Manatee field if we had any delay on Dragon. We are going to continue. I'm going to continue having the conversations with Shell, but we have decided there that we would continue doing all of the work that can be done with respect to Dragon without offending the sanctions that have been imposed by the United States government. And there is a lot of work that can be done in that interim period. As soon as this news came to me, I thought it very important, because I've promised Trinidad and Tobago accountability and transparency, to come directly to you and to present this news to you, but also to tell you that by now you will know that I will continue to pursue this. We will continue to fight for the ability and the opportunity to keep our energy sector whole and the future of Trinidad and Tobago and the CARICOM region in the manner that we have become accustomed to. So I'd like to thank you all for your time this afternoon, and I'll take a couple questions on this alone.
Just wondering, Joel Brown, TV6. So in the first instance, is this in any way reflective of a failure on not necessarily you as you had just become Prime Minister, but the administration in office, given that you had said consistently how important getting natural gas across the border from Venezuela is in light of the issues of supply to plants like Point Lisas, LNG plant in Atlantic LNG and so on?
The answer is no. Jules, in fact, what was described to me by Secretary of State Rubio as well as Mauricio is the work that we had done prior has put our reputation and how we're respected with the United States administration in a very top tier level. And that they will, I mean, I'll go as far as to breach a little of Mauricio's confidence in the conversations that he had with me. He said, we are going to continue working with Trinidad and Tobago because we want Trinidad and Tobago to continue and to be competitive in this area. And we recognize the importance of Trinidad and Tobago for the energy security, not only of Trinidad and Tobago and the region, but even out of the region. So they are going to work with us as they apply their policies. So I am not at all, has there been a failure. In fact, it's the exact opposite, because other people cannot get the types of audience that we are getting and the types of conversations that we're getting.
My short question is, did they, two questions, in the initial notification, was it just, this is it, the end, or did they state why and what we can do? Because everything with this administration, the U.S. administration, seems to be a negotiation, and they want something all the time. What do they want?
What we received is the administrative side. So the way OFAC is a very administrative body, they apply the policy really from the White House and the State Department. And they are really the ones who will then... So what you get is you got a notice. The same way we got the OFAC licenses, that you literally, our lawyers receive it. They receive it and they say, okay, Minister Young, now Prime Minister Young, this is what we've just received from OFAC. You read it and it is very legal, jargon-oriented type language. And it says, okay, this has been revoked. But there is a process that allows you now to make application and to advocate for why this should be taken. So I actually thanks for triggering that, Kishan. there is a wind down period. So this is not an immediate. All when OFAC does this, you will see, even when they're done it with Chevron, all of them, they grant you a wind down period. So the wind down period for this is until the 27th of May. And that allows you an opportunity before it kicks in fully for you to engage with the United States, which is what we're doing.
What are we willing to give if they ask something?
So they understand. The good thing about it is they already understand and have taken very, very careful note of what it is that Trinidad and Tobago can do. And I'm not going to get into this from here because I am now going to have some more detailed discussions with them, I'm sure, but they understand what we offer, and it's not only in the energy sector.
My short version, election season, one of your biggest selling points is vote for me because I've been doing all this work. I can take you past April 29th. How do you restore that confidence in these citizens that, yeah, I'm still the person?
Well, I think the citizens, fortunately for them, have the report card of the past. And that's why I said we started in 2016. By 2018, we had negotiated a commercial term sheet with Venezuela. When the first round of sanctions came in that prevented this, didn't stop. Others would have stopped there. Many stopped there. When you speak to oil and gas companies across the world, they stopped there, pursued it, found a way, developed the strategy, got into speaking with the decision makers in Washington, D.C., got the OFAC licenses. We were the first, amongst the first. Only Chevron got an OFAC license before us. That says a lot. So this is a track record. We then got the amendment where others didn't even get a license. So there is a track record of an ability, if I may put it that way, to negotiate successfully on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, and to have a way to strategically develop relationships, because the same thing has gone on with the oil and gas companies.
Realistically, should we stop? It seems to be a lot more trouble than it's worth. It's a lot of, well, here's 2 years, and we keep waiting for this one thing that seems to be not bearing that fruit that we really hope for.
Completely untrue once again, and the answer is no, we should not stop, because it is not singular, it is not exclusive. So what you're seeing, I stood here for the last 2 post-cabinet press conferences and told you about the success, for example, that BP is turning on additional production. So we have continued doing exactly what needs to be done. So don't buy the narrative of those who try to say all of the eggs are in the dragon basket. It's the complete opposite. So you've seen, and if you ask the people in the energy industry in Trinidad and Tobago, you've seen that rise in activity that has kept us stable at 2.6 BCF a day of production with the BP, with the Shell, with the EOG, with the Perenco, and even onshore with Touchstone for gas and the gas industry. And it absolutely must continue to pursue this. What you have to decide is who is capable of doing it, who has the credibility to be able to do it. Because as the former Prime Minister said, without the ability and the opportunity to get access to cross-border gas, this is not for today. This is not for the government of today. This is for the population and the future citizens down the road, right? So we were coming on stream once again to bring this dragon gas by 2026. It's not, the door isn't shut.
Also the issue of, so some clarification I'm seeking. So the issue of the OFAC license and whatnot being revoked and the May...
yeah, we call it a wind down period.
Right. Does this in any way prevent the transmission of gas at any point? Let's say that, there's the term first gas in the business. So can Trinidad and Tobago, for example, still engage with Venezuela in getting gas across, but would not be able to put it out onto the international market? I know this might take some time, but I'm just seeking clarification.
Jewel, we will need to meet. I will need to continue having conversations with the lawyers. What it does is it prevents payment at this stage to the government of Venezuela. All right? So we are going to continue doing the work because, as I say, and as Secretary of State Rubio told me, he says, Stuart, listen, in this thing, there are many ways and times can change, but don't worry. We're not going to harm Trinidad and Tobago. So we will continue the work of the engineering work, the work of we had actually gone out and we were about to, and I think we actually did it, Shell was telling me, looking for a rig, and they were about to sign the contract for a rig. So things are still progressing. What we're hoping is that there could also be some cost benefits from the manatee, which is being full speed ahead, and we expect the first gas, as I say, in 2027, which is going to be significant gas, and we're looking at how to increase that because we knew there was a possibility on the Dragon side. So it's early. I don't want to speculate. I've come to give you this news that a hurdle has come up in front of us and to give the assurance that we will continue to do what can be done to try and get access to it.
I'm just wondering, in terms of Venezuela, have you had any direct conversation with either President Maduro or any official on his behalf?
Rodriguez or anything?
Not since I received this news. The first thing I wanted to do is come before the population and give this news to you. I am now going to have the necessary conversations with BP and Shell. I have remained in direct contact with the government of Venezuela up to a few days ago, and we will also speak to them as well.
When Dr. Rowley announced this in 2023, I was at that press conference, and the first thing he said was, it's realistic. It's looking like Donald Trump may come back. He doesn't have the same relationship. From then, I would have assumed there would have been a plan B, C, D. Walk us through now. I mean, I know you said there the negotiation, but I'm sure you, before this came up, you had a plan B or a plan C. What can you tell us about that?
Kijan, plan B and plan C and plan D already in play. Plan A, but I just did. This is all about gas production. This is all about the production of gas and getting gas to plants at Point Lisas and LNG plant and methanol plant down in Point Fortin. So you're seeing plan B, plan C, and plan D taking place. You're seeing the continued production by BP, by Shell, by Perenco, by EOG, that I told you about. Woodside and BP up with deep water gas in Calypso project. You're seeing the shallow water bid rounds were successful. You're seeing all those things playing out. So what this would have done is it gives us that extra additional injection of gas that can actually utilize some of the capacity that exists at Point Lisas and Point Fortin in the LNG. I just gave a little, in this, unfortunately, you can't speak before the time, but we are looking at, for example, what can be done with the field of Manatee, the deep water field and this type of thing. So there are things in play. But let's take it one step at a time. So I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. Last question, Jules, and last question. I mean it.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Given I recall some messaging by the government, and you could clarify here, that for the nation to basically hold on or manage the financial side of things, even on a personal level, until the gas comes across the border. There was confidence at that time that this deal would occur in the way that the government had foreseen it. Now we are seeing a different situation. What is your message to the population in that regard?
My message to the population is we're going to continue. My message to the population is there's a wind-down period. That we have immediately done what is responsible, and I have requested the necessary telephone calls and conversations with the decision makers in Washington. I have every expectation that I will get that opportunity. I'm engaged with our lawyers in Washington. I expect that we will, in the interim, be utilizing the legal process to make our case as to why our license should not be revoked. I am not at all... So we have the plan and we are implementing the plan. All right? Just now, Kijan. Paula has a question. That is the last question.
Yes. Right. So Dr. Rowley had said if the Dragon gas deal fell through, then our cuckoo will be cooked. In the event that does happen, regardless of whatever happens during the winding down period, what are your plans for the economy? How can we recover from the loss of that projected?
We don't have it right now, meaning we don't have the production from it. So it isn't a pipeline that has been closed off. So the same way I've just stood there for the last few minutes and said that every time there has been some adversity presented, I have found, as Kijan put it, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. I'll now put in place plan E, plan F. And we're also going to be talking about the diversification plans we have. But don't give up. Don't give up hope and go based on the track record you've seen. And let's get it done, what we can. Okay? Thank you all very much.